Hi, Lily. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
This is fantastic. I'm just like honored to be here with both of you, Rob
Thank
and
you.
you, Lily. So yeah, I was telling Rob I watched the film last night. Fantastic work. And I think I kind of have to start the conversation off with this. My mother, her side of the family, my mom's one of 8 children born in Rogers Park. So, and the last name's Sullivan, which is a pretty standard, north side of Chicago name. So I felt like I was a great audience for this film because I was romanticizing and relating with a lot of this. I know it's sort of a softball question for Rob to get started, but when did you become aware of Barry Gifford's writing?
Well, initially it was when I was in junior high and Wild at Heart came out.
Yeah.
That's really the first time I think I'd heard of Barry's stuff. And much later on, I read the novel and was really surprised to discover that all the really bizarre things in the movie are straight out of the book. So that really impressed me. It was much later on that I stumbled across his cycle of Roy stories. And again, it was a total surprise because it's much different than Wild at Heart. And because it is Chicago-centric, it was just fascinating to look at the history of the city that way.
Yeah, and Lily, had you read a lot of Barry Gifford's writing before you came onto this project? Were you sort of aware of his work as well?
A little bit, not as much as I wish I had been. And this is why these kinds of things are great, because they expose you to things that you might not have been before. Even the jazz that Rob used in the movie, I wasn't aware of, but I did know, and a lot of through the movies and so on. But I got to know it after. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and Rob, let's sort of talk about, I'm sure that this question's being asked to you a lot. Talk about your 3 narrators that you got for this film. All 3 of them, in some ways, have a connection with whether it's the city or the writing or the films themselves that they've been in. How did you go about the process of getting Willem Dafoe, Matt Dillon, and Lily on this project? That's an amazing trio.
It's very hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that these 3 amazing actors are in my movie.
Yeah.
Way early on in the beginning of the process, when I was talking about my vision for the documentary with Barry, he really got excited by some of the approaches I wanted to take. The fact that I didn't want to use talking heads or contemporary interviews or anything like that. I just wanted it to be really about the stories and the visuals and the music. At one point he was like, we should get Willem Dafoe to read some stories for your movie. And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome, but how's that going to happen? And then a couple of days later, he was like, well, let's get Matt Dillon to read some stories too. So once again, I was really excited about that. So he sort of helped connect me to those actors who, of course, have a long working relationship with Barry and love his work and are really familiar with it. I knew that I needed a female narrator because there are some really important female characters in the Roy stories. Roy's mother, Kitty, and some other characters, and I knew that I really needed a female voice. To be honest, I don't remember how Lily popped into my head in the beginning, only that I'd been like a huge fan of hers for years. But when I refresh my memory that she's from Glencoe, and so she has that amazing Illinois accent in her voice, I just knew that would be perfect for the stories. But at the same time, I didn't have a way to approach her really, because I didn't know her personally.
Right.
Then I realized that she and Matt had done a movie called Factotum together.
Okay.
So after I recorded Matt's voiceover, I sort of casually suggested, I was thinking about asking Lili Taylor to be in the film. Do you think she'd be interested? And Matt was really excited about that, and through a roundabout way, got me in touch with Lili, and so we were off to the races.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, it's perfect that
I
this.
want to say one thing about that is
Yeah.
that it's like, I think a lot of it speaks to Barry's energy, to Rob's energy, and when a project comes your way that has that, just that kind of special something about it, it attracts people to it.
Right.
And that's, I think that's what I picked up on. I'm sure that's what Matt and Willem and Lynch and everybody who's been, Barry has that special energy, Rob has that. Any artist who is kind of trying to do something authentically, usually people can respond to that energy. And we're seeing that with this film, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you talked about like the jazz and the animation on it as well, I think is all of it. It's this whole sort of collaborative piece of art. It's not just a documentary. It does feel like a piece of art. But Lili, I also, talking about once you come on, I also wanted to talk to you about this. I thought it was kind of great that you're narrating on this film, because I've always found your voice to be fantastic. Like Rob said, you do sort of have this amazing voice, but I've also noticed you've never, I don't think you've done many animated films, and I don't think you've done a lot of voiceover work in the past. So, so for you, what was it like to sort of be able to sit there? And is it just like, I'm just going to sit here and read, or do you do vocal work and just go, or do you make sure you sort of grasp the material as well before you start to record the narration?
Good question. Thank you, by the way. I need all the encouragement there. I have a hang up with my voice. And as I was told it wasn't trainable, I actually had trouble getting into Goodman of DePaul because they didn't think my voice was trainable. So I have all these hang ups, and I know my voice is actually a great voice.
It is.
Sort of.
It's an amazing voice, Lili. It's amazing. Trust me, I've been listening to it nonstop for 3 years now, and it's amazing.
Yeah, well, it's distinct too, which is great.
I know, it's sort of like fake it till you make it, or sort of like, let others, I have to sort of rely on others' sort of positive feelings about me till I can get there myself. But anyways, thank you.
Yeah.
And each project is different. I've done a few, but each project is different. And because this one was sort of capturing the essence of the character, as opposed to trying to be like a frontline documentary narration,
Right.
It's different. So in some ways, it's just kind of trying to feel her energy and try to get out of the way and let her sort of do it. That's an answer to your question.
Yeah. That's awesome. And Rob too, I mean, so while watching this documentary, there is a complete sort of two sides of it with the character of Roy and Barry. But somehow through the way you do it, it's almost like this melding of the two characters. Did you find that you wanted to show that he sort of spoke about himself through the character of Roy, or was it more, that's just how the writing goes, so they're naturally going to combine together? Because I wonder, you even get like confused at some points, where it's like, is he talking about himself or is he talking about Roy? Because I sort of was picking up on a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I find so beautiful about these stories and Barry's approach to his childhood is it really does become something else. Like, it's partially fiction and partially autobiography.
Yeah. And
at a certain point, you just stop caring about, did this actually happen, or is this a real person? You just get lost in the story. So I wanted to preserve that in the film.
Yeah, well, and I think, obviously the setting's Chicago, and Lili, you've been a part of this city, for your growing up in college. Rob, same as for you. But the Chicago that Barry writes about is obviously a very different Chicago today. So for Lili, when you were reading it, is this sort of when you're reading his material, is this the Chicago you remember, or is it a Chicago that your parents would talk to you about? because I kind of picked up a little bit more nostalgia of this Chicago that Barry talks about, as opposed to what I experienced, because it's many years. I'm much younger than him. But did you sort of pick up a little bit on that sort of old nostalgia for Chicago? I know you live in New York now, but
you know, it felt, I mean, I think Rob's choice of the jazz was such a great other character to introduce, because it had that, it was a, you know, jazz is sort of can be like, not only is it kind of like an undercurrent in some ways, you know, that's what Barry's Chicago felt like to me, a Chicago that I didn't really know about, that I didn't really know how to articulate.
Yeah.
And that's why Barry probably chose a hybrid form to free him up to be able to talk about it. And then the jazz sort of helped bring it to that other level to create that, to help us feel this world that I think a lot of us hadn't experienced or didn't know about or hadn't peeled the curtain, you know, and looked at.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think it sort of starts to come out in what Rob got together for archival footage. And I kind of wanted to ask you about gathering all of that footage together. And I know that probably is more of an editing question and piecing it all together, but talk a little bit about the process of what you had to go through to get all of this footage of, you know, whether it's old photos of Barry. Did he just give you access to that, or did you have to like work and talk with like, you know, independent film Chicago, things of that nature?
Well, I always like to quote from Philip Glass's autobiography, where he says, if you don't know what you're doing, there's the possibility that something interesting will happen. Whereas if you know what you're doing, nothing of interest is likely to happen. So I really didn't know what I was doing when I started out. I had a sort of feeling, a sort of mood that I wanted, and I know what I didn't want. So mostly it was just a lot of exploration. Barry did give me a lot of stuff from his personal archives. He doesn't have a lot from his childhood, but he shared with me what he has.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it was just wading through, you know, countless hours of weird archival footage and stuff from the Library of Congress and the Richard J. Daley papers from UIC.
Wow.
And it was just finding materials that had a sort of resonance to Lili's voice or the jazz or the stories, and just kind of seeing what worked. So it was a collaborative process between me and my editor, Mariana Milherat, who did just an amazing job of like taking all my ideas and making them like 100% better.
Yeah, I love that. I love that when it all sort of comes together like that. And Lili, obviously, it was interesting for me because I'm like looking and through your filmography, and like Rob had said, you worked with Matt Dillon in the past, but you actually, I don't think you've ever worked with Willem Dafoe. He was in Born on the 4th of July, but you both didn't have scenes together in that movie, right? Am I wrong about this? So for you, when you hear that those other two guys are the other narrators, tell me sort of what thought process goes to your head that you're sort of in that collective group of those three narrators.
You know, it's funny. Yeah, when I see the card of the film and the three names, you know, or the press or whatever,
Yeah.
it makes total sense to me. I mean, I feel like when I moved to New York in '88, I did this avant-garde play, and and I worked with the director who had worked with the company Willem was with, a Wooster Group.
Okay.
That was a very, very important theater company for me. He was kind of like an idol for me, you know. I mean, he's not like old, but I looked up to him. And so he was sort of my entry into New York. And and we had similar agents and managers, and I was actually just going to work with him a year ago. I feel like I know Willem. He feels like a brother, you know, like a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
We both love theater. We like experimenting and taking risks. And then Dylan, I've known Dylan again since I moved to New York in '88. I feel like they're just like brothers in spirit, you know, thespian spirits.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know you worked with Abel Ferrara before, and I know him and Willem have a big connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I saw
In
like a lot
fact,
of,
I was going to work with Abel and Willem because Willem and Abel are going to do something that Willem's experimenting with, of course.
right.
And I was going to be in it and couldn't do it. Couldn't get over to Germany or wherever Willem is at the moment.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Rob, too, I talked about it a little bit earlier about the animation. Can you talk about that? I mean, I think that's like a fantastic part of this film because it's not, you know, it's not just uh, bright, colorful animation. It looks like authentically, beautifully hand drawn pieces. And I believe some of it is from Barry. I think some of it's Barry's work, or am I wrong about that?
No, I mean, the animators sort of use Barry's drawings as inspiration, but
Okay.
it's completely from Lili Carre and Kevin Eskew.
Well, talk about sort of, did you have to sort of explain to them what you were looking for and what they were drawing, or did they just listen to the stories that were narrated and they kind of went off of that?
Well, Robert Altman once said that a movie is 90% casting, and I think that absolutely applies to your collaborators as well.
Yeah.
So Lili Carre recommended Kevin to me,
Okay.
and I knew from seeing some of his past work that his work was going to be very different than hers.
Yeah.
It was a sort of organic process, but I knew that Lili Carre was going to do Chicago, Illinois, 1953, which is really when Roy is, a child, like under the age of 10. Right. Whereas Bad Girls, he's more of a teenager, right? So it's more of like the early 60s, which needs a different kind of visual style.
Right.
So I had long talks with both animators, obviously, but I pretty much just let them do their own thing. I sort of pushed them in certain directions. Yeah. And I couldn't be happier with how it turned out.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. Well, and you gave me a good little segue part here. You talked about Bob Altman. I mean, Lily, you've worked with amazing directors. And I think I know the answer to this, but you've worked with Bob Altman, Michael Mann, Mary Harron, John Waters. You've worked with this amazing sort of collection of directors. Is that what draws you to a lot of projects? Is the director, or just like you said, the artists involved?
The director.
Yeah.
It's all comes down to that for me, because as I've said before, that it just doesn't matter if the role is great. What does it matter? Who cares if the whole thing is not gonna be okay? I said that I can just do that like scene in an acting class and just subject the acting students to my little performance, as opposed to waste everybody's time. There's enough stuff out there. So it's about the director and the vision.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it kind of, this might be a question for both of you too, Rob. When you're making this documentary, do you go back and kind of watch a little bit of Lost Highway or Wild at Heart? I mean, are those sort of, do you want to kind of pick up a little bit of that style from what David Lynch did, or is it just you want to implement your own sort of look and feel to it and get away from that?
Well, the movies you just mentioned are so deep in my DNA that I don't want to go back and watch them again because they're already up here.
Yeah.
Very early on, I was reminded of the Terrence Davies film of Time in the City, which is about his Liverpool childhood.
Okay.
And that sort of convinced me that that could be a template that I could sort of apply to what I wanted to do. Right. But having had that thought, I did not go back to the movie because I didn't want to accidentally steal anything from it. So I think it's, you get inspiration from the unlikeliest sources. You just have to be open and ultimately just go with your gut, what your gut is telling you to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, and when you're communicating with Willem and Matt and Lily, do the three of them give you any tips, or are they just, kind of as Lily was saying, ready for you to be the director and be in charge, or did they sort of guide you at all in the process?
Well, Lily can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember giving you a lot of direction.
Yeah.
The only thing I can remember is at one point, Roy's mom, Kitty, is from Texas.
Yeah.
So I think I said, it'd be nice if you could try a little twang in her voice, which she did, and it was wonderful. But
yeah.
Beyond that, I mean, Lily knows what she's doing, so I'm just getting out of the way and letting her do her thing, really. And Matt and Willem know Barry's work so well that, again, I just let them perform the stories, and hopefully, I get a good recording out of it, basically.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Lily too, I mean, sort of your acting career has in a lot of ways become synonymous with Chicago. Do you continue to try to look for projects that highlight this city? I mean, I know High Fidelity is kind of like it's a staple film, I feel like, in this city of Chicago now. Even though you go to different cities, you're in Los Angeles or New York to make films, does Chicago still a place that you kind of come back to, or at least want to make a documentary like this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here now, actually. I'm in Lombard at the moment.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know, I'm in Lombard. I love, this is still, my family's still here. It's an important place for me. If someone were to come to me with something that would shoot here and be about this place, I'd be there in a second.
Yeah.
In some ways, so much of it also is about like and also I love Chicago crews. My brother was an electrician in Chicago in the 80s. And I've worked with some of those guys who are still working. And they are some of the most beautiful people, the Chicago crews. I love them. And they treat me like a little sister because I am the little sister to one of their buddies, So I would want to come back just to work with the crew, Yeah. But it's also about just like incentives and what it's like when Toronto became the place to shoot and the money wasn't coming here.
Yeah. It's
sort of like, unfortunately, film is sort of dictated on incentives and locations and if the city's amenable and so on. Frears was able to make it work with High Fidelity, but
all right.
I feel like I'm not hearing Chicago much in terms of people shooting here. And so I'll just put it out there. If I'd be here in a second if anybody has any ideas.
Yeah, I think more movies need to highlight this city. I think it's too beautiful to not happen.
Exactly.
Now, Rob,
I'm really hoping on the other side of this pandemic that Chicago film does pick up again, because it does have so many advantages.
Yeah, it does.
Well, they're not letting us into Canada, so it very well could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
My God. Yeah, I can't believe we have to say that now.
Yeah.
So, Rob, you've got the North American premiere coming up. Is it a lot of jitters coming, from you? Are you just confident, or is it, what would you say is one of your biggest fears with a lot of people about to see this movie?
Oh, yeah, there's certainly jitters. This has just been such a weird, terrible year. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, the problems of releasing a film right now seem so small compared to everything else that's going on. But at the same time, it has just been just crazy. I mean, we had our world premiere at the Glasgow Film Festival on February 28th. And it was like, oh, this is so amazing. We're making this big international debut. It's going to be smooth sailing from here out.
Right.
And of course, within 2 weeks, that dream was totally smashed. In fact, I think Glasgow was one of the last major film festivals whose schedule was not impacted by the pandemic at all.
Wow.
So after Glasgow, there was another online film festival in the UK that we took part in, but festivals just kind of shut down for a while because nobody really knew what was going on. So I'm really excited about finally being able to show it to American audiences through Dances with Films LA. Because it's a virtual film festival world, it's kind of like the Wild Wild West. Nobody really knows, is this going to be good for distribution later on? Is it going to be a strike against us? We're all just kind of keeping our minds open and seeing what happens, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, and I think that's why it's important, especially for me to tell people how good this film is. I mean, I think, like you said, to get a documentary right, you have to have a really great collaboration, and that's obvious up on the screen because everybody is in step. It seems that everything's in step with this film, whether it's the editing, the storytelling, the writing is obviously the highlight, right? I mean, creating a vivid imagery. Yeah, so I mean, I think during these pandemic times, you're just hoping that the audiences out there will be attracted and take the time to see a movie like this.
As much as I would have loved to premiere it on the big screen,
Yeah.
And I'm still hoping that next year we can show it at the Music Box, for example.
Yeah.
Roy's World is a sort of very intimate movie, so maybe somebody watching it at home with friends and family is not such a bad way for them to experience it. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and I know, Lili, you've talked about like working on television, how much more accessible it is nowadays and easier for it is as an actor. I mean, do you find that the pandemic's just going to push more actors into television?
Well, I don't know, because the problem is that the shooting is we're not shooting yet, really. I mean,
Right.
we're starting, we're gearing up.
Right.
But I think that what it might do is it might make our relationship to the platform of either a computer screen or the TV,
Yeah.
as an audience member, that could change. Like, I think the DNC convention was a really interesting example
Yeah.
of something that really worked well, actually, and better than how it was before in this big hall, which was sort of, in some ways, people said it captured much better what that's for. It's for the people. We got to see the people in the United States.
Yeah.
I think, for instance, theater is coming up against a lot of interesting questions, and Zoom, and I think this is a time that requires us to use our imagination and to just try, if we can, to just dig deep and keep getting those neurons to grow and like figure out how to do this. And I think Roy's World is a film that could benefit from the intimacy of this moment. I wouldn't want to have a huge blockbuster on my hands, I'll tell you that much, but.
Well, this was strictly a shoestring operation. So yeah, the opposite of a blockbuster.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations to both of you. I mean, we can wrap up right now. I mean, I think this is a great documentary. I think it should inspire people to read and write and discover Barry's work. And I think that's what's important. So thank you to both of you for being here and talking with me today.
Oh, you're great.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. Good luck with the rest of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, you too.